Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. This afternoon, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about how Linux is being used in large enterprises, and in particular, how organizations like SUSE are bringing high performance in working with organizations who are using Linux. I'd like to introduce our panel by introducing the moderator of the panel, Nils Brockman, the President and General Manager of the SUSE Business Unit. Come on up, gentlemen. Nils is a new face in town. He took over the SUSE Business Unit and is doing a bang-up job. So come on up, guys.
While those guys join, I will let you know that, yes, we have decided to use the keynote slot that we have today for a discussion, a panel discussion with some of our enterprise customers. So take a seat, obviously. And so the advantage for all of us is that we are able to sit while you sit as well, right? So now let me quickly introduce to you the people that we have on the panel. So on the very left side from my side, there's Ludek Safa, and he is actually working for the Czech Ministry of Internal Affairs. And he's there an advisor for the e-commerce projects, e-computing projects.
It's a huge e-governmental project which is run in Czech Republic, which actually extends the central public affairs to the post offices and other things. So you can talk about it later.
And then next we have Udo Seidel. So he's working for Amadeus, and he's responsible for Linux and Unix teams there. And I also heard that you are a frequent speaker at industry events as well, and sometimes also write articles about the Unix.
Maybe less frequent, but yeah, occasionally.
From time to time. So you might be able to read something from him from time to time. And then last but not least, to my left, Andreas Pöschel. He's working for BMW. And you're also responsible for Linux and Unix there. But I also understand that you are responsible for the virtualization strategy of the BMW group.
In general, yeah, virtualization is part of the Linux strategy, and I'm responsible for the architecture and solutions on the Linux side, including base OS, AJ, and virtualization.
Okay. So 3 customers with slightly different background. And obviously the conversation was centered around how are these companies, how are these enterprises using Linux in their day-to-day operations, and also what kind of experiences are they making with Linux, and also for the community, how do they interact with the community? What kind of value do they expect to receive from the community, but equally what are they willing or are they actually contributing back to the community? So that's in a nutshell the topic that we try to cover today, and we have roughly 30 minutes for that. So once more, I start with you, Ludek. So why don't you just tell us a little bit, since when you use Linux, why have you chosen Linux, what are your experiences, what's the strategy around Linux for your organization?
No problem at all. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to meet the crowd here. Thank you very much. And the Ministry of Interior, joined Linux world from the other side, to say, from the desktop. Because we at first rolled out desktop Linux for our post offices and the branch thing. So we've rolled it out for, say, 5,000 places. And then when the e-government started to evolve, now we have moved to the data center itself, and we built the back end of the project. And this approach might be quite different than the colleagues over here would have, I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So I think we took the normal approach. So we started on the servers, desktops. It's a different story. Yeah. Well, we're working with Linux now since 9 years. There was a strategic decision with which technology we want to go into the future. Amadeus started as a mainframe-based company, and we had a lot of things there like open source as well for the operating system, influence to implement our changes or things which are not delivered by the vendor. And the same things we have seen with Linux as well, and we are actively migrating off mainframe to commodity hardware using now I would say standard operating system, which Linux is in these days.
Yeah, we started with Linux at 2003. As most of the companies in the web server environment, and 2006 we had a strategic decision to put everything on x86 hardware. Linux and Windows are the sole strategic platforms since 2006, and since then we migrated about 1,600 RISC servers over to x86 platform, And in the meantime, everything is running on Linux. Databases, SAP, all the business critical stuff. Desktop related is usually more the Windows part, so those services are running on Windows. And we are also doing open source virtualization with Xen. And it's not only the development systems or the smaller ones. We've got about 1,000 VMs running on Xen, and also the production control systems of all our plants are running on open source virtualization. And now we're starting with SAP virtualization, VMs up to 16 core, 64 gigs. And that's a really big deal with the open source virtualization for us.
Okay, so the entry was from the Linux desktop over to Linux on x86 servers via the mainframe. Interesting enough as well, Linux first on the mainframe and then migrating off to x86 systems. And then you started with standardization about x86 systems and Linux. So you said you are running SAP workloads, ERP workloads in production. What are the workloads that you are running on Linux?
We are exactly running several applications. The application stack is made and built on databases. We are running Oracle, which is our, virtualization exception as well, because the Oracle instances are the only ones we are running directly on the physical hardware. All the other stuff is virtualized on Xen as well. Actually, the Xen was our choice because of the control of the code. We were thinking about VMware quite heavily, but we had the idea, to stick to the code. We had some kind of, not control that we would like to change it, but the control we know that, came from the several development controls and all kind of stuff, and we can somehow tweak it if it would be needed. And we are making up several custom applications, to be honest, Java-based servers with special web services inside and that kind of stuff. So our workload is a bit specific. It might be, different way in your case when you are running pretty much standard set of enterprise applications, I'd say,
Yeah. Well, we do this, yeah. We run enterprise applications delivered by a third-party vendor, but Amadeus develops a lot of itself. The application we use for the airline industry. Mm-hmm. So for instance, we provide customer and flight management service. So we are responsible with our systems that you get your boarding pass, that you get on the plane for some airlines. And those mission-critical applications, they run on Linux. And also some of the database. We're also in the hosting business, so if you book your travel, your vacation, your flight via Opodo, then you end up on our servers, yeah.
Okay, so pretty mission-critical stuff, obviously.
Yes, absolutely, of course.
Now, what is interesting, and I think Nassim said that earlier on, since you are users of Linux in your enterprise, so running critical workloads on it, it would be interesting for the audience to describe how you actually interact with the community. First of all, you're all here on a community-based event, so that's a good sign. And you're not just here because we asked you to, because it was part of your normal plan. But anyhow, why don't you just describe what is your engagement with the community, and what's the value that you give to them?
Yeah, we're not really coding, so we are a car manufacturer. Of course, we are IT, but we are not programmers which contribute to the code directly. But I think we can contribute in terms of use cases, in terms of test cases. We've got environments that may be hard to find in any lab. So if you need to make some tests with 2,000 LUNs attached to a host-based adapter, I don't know how many of you could really do that. So we try to find the use cases, provide some ideas how to continue, and we give that information to our distributor. And we hope that, like you, really give that back to the community, and that you do the direct interaction with the community.
And that raises the question, does this work?
And that's a fair question. I will get to that. Just real quick, tell us what is the value that you give and get from the community and how you interact?
So all of the community is more or less a technical conversation, and it's news groups, it's emails, but very much also the conferences where you can really talk to the people face to face, and you get the latest information. And this is it's really worth going to all these events. There's also a business relationship, but this is more with the Linux vendors, I would say. We also have a technical relationship with them. But it's really talking to the people who do the coding and also tell them, well, this is nice stuff, but this is what we need before. Yeah.
Got it.
Actually, we are, as the central public government, has, quite limited options how to give the community back. What we are actually doing, and Czech government is quite good in it, giving the publicity to the projects, the publicity of the open source itself, because it's quite important, we think, for the future. And I think, in the whole Europe, and at least as well in Germany, there were some movements, in the public sector towards open source software, because in general we think it's more secure, not only from the code perspective, but from the, how the whole thing is organized perspective as well. So we are trying to interact with the community in this way, but our options are quite limited. We can't just decide and do.
But I agree with you that it's. I think it's also important that companies like us really share the information what we are doing with Linux. It's not all about the huge legacy systems. No, we are doing business critical stuff with Linux. Linux is high quality, high performance, flexible, and all that stuff. And if more people know that and more companies know that, I think this also gives Linux a really push forward.
So I think you have to take the badge away from your microphone. That's what I just learned, because it creates some noise. Thanks for that. All right, so the question earlier on was, so what do enterprise class Linux vendors like SUSE really do with the information that they get back from their customers? So you interact directly with the community, but in many cases you interact through us, or at least expect your vendor to participate in getting certain things implemented and done. So the answer is as follows, and I can't lay it out in all detail, but yes, we are an enterprise class vendor. That means we have an infrastructure lined up that is chartered to actually capture information that we get from our customers, whether this is product management, product marketing, sales engineers, or even our service and support teams. They all are sources for us, right? So they all gather information from you and feed it back into the infrastructure of our company. And then we have, obviously, not just the people, but also the processes to group that information together, to prioritize the information at the end of the day, and then make decisions what should end up on our roadmaps and our release schedules. Now, the interesting part starts now. Once we made that decision, obviously, we are a company that develops in conjunction, in partnership, in collaboration with the open source community, with the Linux community. And that means in some cases we would go ahead and develop fixes or some stuff like that ourselves and make them available to customers. But our goal would always be to make them available upstream. And to make them available upstream, you have to collaborate with the maintainers, the subsystem maintainers. And now we are in this business since 20 years, honestly. So we have lots of contacts, we are well aligned, we are present, we contribute, we have maintainers ourselves and subsystem maintainers. And those people interact with the community, and then decisions are made based on participation, sharing, collaboration, contribution. Decisions are made what makes it upstream. So sometimes if we propose something, it makes it upstream, sometimes it might not make it upstream. Or if we want to see a feature developed, we engage with those communities and some of the subsystem groups, and then there might be a decision that actually the community develops a certain feature, then it's upstream anyhow, right? So that's, at the end of the day, it works. So there's an infrastructure capturing, prioritizing, and feeding it into the community, contributing ourselves, but also making sure that we get buy-in from the community, that stuff makes it upstream at the end of the day. That's how it works.
That would be important to us, because the big advantage of Linux is the flexibility, to the freedom of choice. And if it wouldn't get upstream, we would have the vendor login again, which is the big advantage of Linux in general.
Agreed.
So I really appreciate that.
We understand that, and that's also that's part of our ecosystem and how we develop and operate, and that will definitely be the case always at the end of the day. By the way, there was just here, and you all know that, you hopefully are aware of that as well, there are current developer meetings, and we have our maintainers and developers already in those groups. So the networking, the relationship, the contribution is important to be successful in that area.
Actually, that's where we see your role as an enterprise Linux provider. We could easily choose a Linux, and to do something, but we expect the enterprise vendor to be the mouth of the community when we need to know something, and the ears of the community when we, need something to be changed, and giving us the support. So that's why we've choose less, to be run our servers, even though there are some costs connected to it. Still, this is, pay off in a million times, because we would not be able to handle just, common Linux,
Understood. Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some of the Linux functionality, because there's an audience that is interested in that as well. Mm-hmm. So what are the things that you would like to change, or what are the things that you're missing? What are the things that need to improve? Talk about Linux in general. Give us the feedback.
Let's start with the things that are good.
Okay, also good. Yes.
Because it's more that's good than what's bad, or not that good. What I love at Linux, it's the possibility. It's so flexible, the building blocks. I love saying that I read on the internet one time, intoxicated by possibility. And this is how Linux is. There's so many possibilities to do something, to implement something. So it can feel you a little bit dizzy, but it really helps you to do some innovative stuff. Just exchange some single blocks, the strict layered concepts. You can stick to the concept. You don't have to really select a product. Just exchange the products. If you stick to the concept, you can do everything. And if there's something better, just exchange it. What's not that good to us, or what we would like to see improved, sometimes we encounter the problem that it seems like a lot of stuff is tested on smaller systems. As I said before, add 2,000 LUNs to a server and the hell demon takes forever to boot up. So this is something we encounter, but I think this improved during the last years, because beforehand Linux was not in the big enterprises, not the big systems, and now we start to push it. We would like to see it promoted, and so we are in a good way. And
I think we have to work together on that one, because the vendor may not be aware of this requirement because they don't have a big data center as a test lab. I fully understand this. And this is also a challenge for us, for Amadeus. Big scale doesn't work there as well. But I see, as Andreas, a lot of improvement in that area. The awareness is there. The people talk to customer, the vendors talk to the customer. Is this something of interest for you? And they even talk to us, okay, for the next release, what would you like to see there? And this is really good. And like Andy mentioned, I can only echo that. The flexibility, the open mindset, this is what we really like to work with Linux. And this is what we are used to in the past on mainframes, and now we can continue with that one.
Actually, I like the metaphor of the building blocks very much, because our intention was, to not use to, some building block, but made these building blocks, as steel as possible, hard, defined, and, not even moving. But if you are, trying to make these blocks, as tough as possible, then the sharps, starting to appear, and suddenly you realize, for example, we are not operating at that scale that you guys might operate, But, for example, what was quite important for us, and we fought with this, and we are still fighting, to, for example, support the enterprise level hardware with all these specific drivers, multipathing and all that kind of stuff, and not spoiling the standard kernel, because then the conversation starts. Is it still the same supported kernel, who is supporting this driver, that driver, and now we, even if we didn't want it so, we have, specific solution. But what we would like to see is, that enterprise level hardware had it somehow inside, all that, drivers for, fiber channel cards and that kind of stuff, which enables you to do advanced stuff you bought the fiber channel card for, and that kind of stuff. So that was making us a pain. We are trying still to go, but it would be where we would like to see the improvement in the future, you know.
And as you mentioned, the multipath, especially in the storage area.
Sure.
For virtualization.
Yeah, exactly.
Check.
When you start to
Memory,
virtualize,
check.
you are, you know.
But the storage, especially for large scale virtualization, if you need high performance, disaster safety, we use host-based mirroring, for example. Try to do host-based mirroring and live migration and all that stuff, it really gets complicated. And so I appreciate the move towards the new file systems. Dirk is maybe somewhere, ButterFS, and also cloud file systems, where you have got the possibility to do the replication, the scale-out possibility, and see that as part of the standard Linux, and not something you have to buy from a third-party vendor.
Yeah.
Because the storage is the most important stuff to us at the moment. Everything else is, we do that for years, but storage, especially because of the consolidation, is getting more and more important.
And the virtualizing, you know, as well, because all your computers suddenly turn into the data. You know, you need to, you know, just move around. So yes, that's what, you know, we've seen as a thing we need to, you know, fight with for some time. We were able to, but it would be nice to see the improvements going with this direction, because all the data center in the future will be somehow cloud-like, you know. So that's it.
So I think now happens what exactly we thought might happen. The conversation could go on forever, right? Because now we're getting into that, and yes, we are asked to observe time as well. So I actually have to lead us to the last block of things that we maybe can discuss. And that's a little bit about, so where do we see Linux going from here, also in the enterprise. And this time I take the lead, say a couple of things, how we see it, and then you weigh in and see how that compares to what you see. So obviously, so SUSE is in the business of developing Linux, supporting Linux for enterprises since almost 20 years. Amazingly enough, we will celebrate our 20th year's anniversary next year. And in this time, Linux really developed from being a promise to being pervasive. And we have many customers, enterprise customers, that already today, more step by step, run mission-critical, demanding workloads on Linux. So Linux has matured with regards to that. And you sometimes would be surprised, and you know it firsthand, what kind of mission-critical systems really are there that use Linux as the platform. Now, there are sometimes still cases where customers saw gaps compared to Unix, and that sometimes prevents them from moving certain workloads from Unix to Linux, although the trend definitely exists. And we think that this will rapidly change. We will move to Linux kernel version 3 in our next release. And you already said that there will be improved file system support, better FS with snapshot and rollback capabilities. There will be a container technology which helps in the area of virtualization, and there will be tracing capabilities. And these are the things that we believe close the gap between Linux and Unix finally. And we see that actually the decline of Unix will accelerate quite a bit due to that fact, and more workloads will be moved faster over to Linux. Also the more demanding mission-critical workloads, and we're actually looking forward to support that trend. So how do you see that? And maybe Linux in the car. I don't want to confine you just to that, but Linux. What does Linux to my car? I wish I would have a BMW.
Hopefully nothing bad. Yeah. We are looking into Linux for the car. So there's the Genevieve project. There's just at the moment another keynote going on for the Embedded Linux conference. A guy talking about the Genevieve project, which describes a distribution, Linux distribution for automotive use. And we also see the possibility of Linux in the car, especially for the entertainment head units. So all the stuff that does some interaction to the user, not for brake systems or something like that at the moment, but for the entertainment systems, that is a valid possibility, and we are looking into that.
Okay, good. Future of Linux?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something, so bridging the gap between Unix and Linux, but this is what most of the people compare. And I see also a lot of those gaps closed with the recent versions of Linux. Something was mentioned about the hardware, and I think this is a big challenge for Linux. IT is evolving so rapidly, and things are changing, and to keep up the speed, to stay up to the date, that's difficult for OS, for operating system. And we learned during the last 2 days that the complexity of the Linux kernel is increasing, it will not decrease. So this is a challenge. But I'm full of hope that this will work out. What I'm missing right now, or still, is now comparing more with the Microsoft environment, a central approach for role-based concepts and policies and those things. And this is what we, for instance, need in the big enterprise. I know there are some discussions already ongoing, and this is what I see as a challenge for Linux in the future, to get this bit also done. But yeah, I just mentioned already the file systems in the storage area. This is also changing a lot, and Linux seems to be really up to date with the technology here, and this is really good. It really surprised me that how far we are already with Linux in this particular area. Yeah.
But this is due to the building blocks, because you can exchange just one piece and still use the rest. True. And this is the big advantage of Linux. Yeah. If I use, for example, a proprietary solution for virtualization, I can choose between 3 different storage options. On Xen, as we do, or KVM, you can choose whatever you would like to and whatever Linux knows. Mm-hmm. And that's really a lot. And things evolve, yeah, of course, and there are new possibilities. Linux, at the moment, we are thinking of business critical, but business critical scale out. Mm-hmm. That's the next step. Yeah. And there are so many different possibilities to think of, and I think there's a long way for Linux and also for the other operating systems to go.
Actually, what we are seeing as the possibility which none other operating system can do than Linux is, to make the cloud concept built into the operating system itself. Run the whole operating system inside the hypervisor by default, not having to implement Xen on its own, but having it there from the beginning with the online moving capabilities and all that kind of stuff, and just disable it if there is a special purpose for it. So because I think for us especially, we are so pushed to share the resources, that virtualization is a key for us. And as the cloud concept will evolve to the hybrid clouds, where we will be able to run part of it here and part of it there, somewhere outsourced when it's needed in the peak times, because especially in public you have peaks, you have Monday, Tuesday nothing, Wednesday peak, Thursday nothing, and it's special workload, and to handle these peaks is very challenging, and the better, embedded inside the virtualization support in the future, that would be perfect.
Okay. As you were talking about the future challenges, do you think you're now better aligned to Linux after the SUSE?
And that has to be, unfortunately, then the last sentence, because I know that we're running out of time. Many people might know that. So there was an organizational change to the SUSE. We are now operating SUSE as an independent business unit, pretty much as an independent company inside a group umbrella of a larger organization. And what that gives to us is the ability to really focus and dedicate all our time, all our attention, all the major business functions solely to enterprise Linux only. And that was different in the past, where we were embedded in larger frameworks. Now it's all about Linux, enterprise Linux, understanding the needs of the customers, the markets, and then rallying all the business functions that are under our control behind it and execute against that. So I think you will see more focus, more agility around making progress in that area. And that's probably the biggest benefit for customers at the end of the day of taking off that new organizational structure. And unfortunately now, my cruel job is to stop the conversation. So I thank you for joining and for participating, being flexible and open to do that.
It was a pleasure.
And thanks all of you to listen. We agreed to be outside. There's a coffee stand for just a little while, so in case you want to grab some of the customers and talk to them, have specific questions about some of the things that they said, or want to just interact with us, we would be outside there, and just grab us, and then we can talk a little bit longer there. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your stay here at LinuxCon. Thanks.